Good evening. I'm Megan Cruz with NASA's Office of Communication, and thank you for joining us to discuss NASA's Boeing crew flight test mission. At around 8:30 this evening, about 2 hours before our targeted liftoff time of 10:34 p.m. Eastern Time, the launch team decided to stand down from today's launch attempt. To share what we know and the next steps forward, we've assembled the following people. To my left here, we have Ken Bowersox, Associate Administrator of NASA's Space Operations Mission Directorate. Steve Stitch, Manager, NASA's Commercial Crew Program. Dana Weigel, Manager, NASA's International Space Station Program. Tori Bruno, President and CEO, United Launch Alliance. And Mark Nappy, Vice President and Program Manager, Commercial Crew Program at Boeing. Now, each will give opening remarks, and then we will welcome questions here in the room and also over the phone. For those in the room, just wait for a mic to get to you, and for those on the phone, you can press *1 to enter the question queue. Okay, Ken, go ahead.
All right. Hey, well, thanks for joining us tonight. I know everybody was eager to see a launch. It would have been happening right about now, and probably feeling a little disappointed that we didn't get to see the launch. But all I want to say first is that good things are worth waiting for, and we'll get a chance to see that rocket and spacecraft lift off the pad here soon. It was really impressive to watch the launch team as the issue popped up. The count had been going very smoothly, and they spotted the issue. They followed their flight rules and made the decision to scrub so that they could do some more troubleshooting and decide what we were going to do next. We still have to gather more data. We don't have a definitive plan for you yet. That will come as soon as we can provide it, but the team will be working through that really soon. And now I just want to pass over to Steve Sitch, the Commercial Crew Program Manager, to give you a little more information, and he'll pass on to folks that'll give you even more.
Yeah, thanks, Ken, and thank you for all your interest in our crewed flight test. I want to start off saying how proud I am of the integrated team, the United Launch Alliance, Boeing, and NASA team. Did a great job of working through the countdown today, and did a great job making a tough call following the flight rules that were all set up for this crewed mission ahead of time. You know, as Sunny has told us a couple of times, there was nothing magical about a certain date to go launch on. So we're taking it one step at a time, and we're going to launch when we're ready and fly when it's safe to do so. Overall, things were going really well in the launch countdown. In fact, we were a little bit ahead of the timeline and talking about maybe being able to close the hatch a little bit early. The team did a great job of getting out to the pad and getting Butch and Sunny in the vehicle, and things were going well when the team noticed on the Centaur there's a valve, a LOX valve that regulates the pressure in the Centaur upper stage. And so the pressure is very important for a couple reasons. One, you need the pressures right in both the LOX and the liquid hydrogen tank to provide propellants to the RL-10 engines that will fly in the second stage and take the crew into orbit, and also for structural capability of the tank. And so we saw the self-regulating valve on the LOX side had a bit of a buzz, and so it was moving in a strange behavior. The flight rules had been laid out for this flight ahead of time. With the crew at the launch pad, the proper action was to scrub, and the United Launch Alliance team did a great job of assessing the data, talking through various options, and put us into a scrub condition. So I really commend the team for making that tough call. It was really impressive to watch them work through the problem. Now we'll take the next day or so to look at the data and to recommend the next course of action. Just a reminder, in terms of launch opportunities, we have tomorrow, Tuesday, as an opportunity, May 7th, and that launch time is 10:11 Eastern, 10:11 p.m. Eastern. And then we'll have a couple of opportunities at the end of the week on Friday and Saturday. The Friday opportunity is launching at 9 p.m. Eastern. So again, the most important thing over the next 24 hours or so is to look at all the data, look at the fault trees, look at how the valve's performing, and then look at the remaining life potentially in the valve, and then we'll take the next steps and fly when we're ready. And I'll turn it over to Dana Weigel.
And thank you all for being here this evening. I'll echo what Ken and Steve said. The teams did a great job today with all of the mission prep and then the final scrub call. Great calls by the team. We're not in a rush to fly from a station standpoint. We did clear our summer schedule intentionally to give us plenty of runway for this CFT mission. Our next docking vehicle comes up in August, so plenty of time. When CFT is ready to fly, when ULA, Boeing, and CCP give that final go, station will be ready for CFT to come on board. And with that, I'll pass it to Tori.
Thank you, Dana. So I'll start by echoing what Ken and Steve said. This was really more about flight rules than it was about the significance of the event, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Our philosophy is we don't change the fueled state of the vehicle when the crew is present. You can do it otherwise from that, and other people do, but that's our philosophy, and so we built our flight rules around that in our procedures, in our decision points. What occurred, as was said, is that we have a mechanical valve that vents the ullage pressure on the lock, so it's venting gas. It's not dissimilar to many other valves like that. You have one in your home on your hot water tank that's not all that different. And every now and again, in rare occasions, a valve like that can get into a position where it's just off the seat, its temperature, its stiffness, everything is just right, and it'll flutter, or it'll buzz in this case, and cycle. And that we've seen that before. We've seen a sustained buzz like this on AV-53. We've seen short buzzes maybe 3 or 4 times. And what you would typically do is activate the solenoid that forces the valve closed, cycling the valve, if you will, and then you turn that off and you let it return, and it almost always stops. It has, in fact, stopped. Once we had the crew off, we cycled the valve and it stopped buzzing. If this were a satellite, that is our standard procedure, and the satellite would already be in orbit. But that changes the state of the fueled Centaur, and we don't do that when people are present. And so our flight rules called for us to scrub and to take the crew off before we cycled that valve. So that is what has happened. Right now, we are going through all the data. That's why I'm here and not Gary Wentz, whom you would normally see, because he's busy working. We don't have an instrument on the valve that tells us how much it opened. We are inferring the buzzing by looking at accelerometers that are nearby on the RL-10 rocket engines. So what we couldn't do during the count in real time and are doing now is going through that data to assess how many cycles were on the valve and whether or not it was fully open or not, so that we know if those count as full cycles. We qualled it to a certain number. In fact, I'll tell you, we qualled it to 200,000 full opens and closes. If that buzzing was a full open and close, we would have been approaching our estimate, that number. Valve's probably good for a lot more than that, but we didn't test it to that, and therefore that's our limit. So the team will work on that all night. Fair chance we'll know tomorrow whether the valve exceeded its life or not, or whether it has enough life against the qual limit that we established to do another attempt. If we do, we'll get right back with our partners here and figure out when that would be. It could be a pretty quick turn. If not, we'll have to remove and replace the valve, which means we have to take the pressure fully off the Centaur upper stage. We do that by stretching it to support it. Remember, it's a pressure-stabilized stage. It has to be either stretched or under pressure to be structurally stable. And then we would remove and replace it. We have spare valves. We know how to do it. We've done it before, but it would take several days. And so we would coordinate with the range and with, with our partners at NASA and at Boeing, and then we'd have a date for you, pretty soon. But I can't tell you that right now because we're still looking at the data. So again, I promised Butch and Sonny a boring evening. I didn't mean for it to be quite this boring, but we're going to follow our rules, and we're going to make sure that the crew is safe. Over to you.
All right, good afternoon. So I did talk to the crew right before we came over here, and they're in good spirits. They totally understand these kinds of situations. So, a lot of things got to go right, and it's not the majority of the things. Everything has to go right before we launch. And so something didn't go right today, and we will stand down, and when the experts tell us that we need to stand down, that's exactly what we do. And we'll get ready for the next opportunity. Today was a good dry run for the entire process. The crew over in crew quarters getting ready, getting suited up, getting transported over, the closeout crew working in the white room and getting the crew cabin ready, the crew doing the actual ingress and getting as close to where we got with closing the hatch. Like Steve said, we were ahead of schedule. We were probably 45 minutes ahead of schedule. So the team did an excellent job. And this, again, was a real good dry run for us. So from this point, we just get the vehicle stabilized. We get it neutral. If we stay at the pad, we'll be ready for the next attempt. If we have to go back to the VIF, then we'll still be in a good state, vehicle state, to support coming back out to the pad. Like Dana said, the month of May is available for us, so we'll wait until we understand what the problem is. We'll set the next launch date. We'll restart the clock, and then hopefully we see you here in a couple of days or maybe even tomorrow. Back to you, Megan.
Thank you all for sharing those new details. We'll take questions now. We can start with here in the room. We'll go over there. Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Oh, hi, Chris Davenport from the Washington Post. I guess for Tori, thanks for doing this at this hour. Just a quick question. You said you recycled it and it stopped buzzing. So if it was a satellite, you would have gone ahead and launched. But how do you know that, if you tried again to do it tomorrow night, if you don't replace it, that it won't just start buzzing or having that weird behavior again? Thanks.
Well, we don't know for sure that it wouldn't buzz. We have a lot of experience with this type of valve, and so that's what we're relying upon to say that it's pretty high probability that if the valve quiets down and still has enough life on it to go through a whole sequence and countdown, that we would be fine. And so it would definitely be worth making that attempt, because if it doesn't, we'll scrub and we'll replace it.
And it was a really good action for ULA to stop the valve. In other words, to command it shut, to stop the buzzing tonight, to preserve life on the valve. So it was a great action by the ULA team.
We'll go to Jeff here on this side as well.
Jeff Faust of Space News. Under what scenario would you be able to attempt a launch again tomorrow? What would you have to find out and when in order to preserve a launch opportunity tomorrow night?
I'm sorry, Jeff, I'm going to be a little technical because you asked a technical question. So, you should think of this, it's like your radiator cap, right? There's a disc that's sitting over a hole, and there's a spring. And, there are circumstances when you can get it to cycle. It's not that unusual. This type of valve does that in many applications. If the stroke is large, then there's a lot of energy, and those are full strokes. That's how we qualify it, by forcing it to fully cycle. And as I said, full cycles, we know it can do 200,000. Probably do more, but we can't prove that because we only tested it to 200. What we're trying to analyze tonight, what we are analyzing tonight, is data that would help us understand were these full cycles, and so all of that energy, one for one against the 200,000, or were these very low amplitude, low energy buzzes against the seat, in which case we would calculate that equivalent energy and we'd have an equivalent count of cycles that would be whatever they are. If they are significantly less than the 200,000, then we might feel we have enough life to attempt another launch. We'll know that likely tomorrow. Can't give you a specific time. The team will work all night, and it depends a little bit on the data. Like I explained before, we don't actually have, an instrument on the valve that measures the stroke of that seat. So we're having to infer this from other instrumentation that's nearby.
Thank you for that. We'll take two more in the room before going to the phones. We'll take her right there, yes.
Hi, Elizabeth Howell for Space.com. This is for Tori. Can you explain where you have seen this issue before? Because you mentioned it very briefly. Can you give some more details?
Yeah, so a prolonged buzzing like this was seen on AV-53, an earlier Atlas launch some time ago. Cycling the valve interrupted it, as we expect. 3 or 4 other times we have seen short buzzing where it didn't sustain, but when it reappeared, we cycled the valve and it stopped and never appeared again. So we have experience 4 to 5 times with this, one time with this exact behavior.
We'll go to Will here on this side.
Thanks. Hi, Will Robinson Smith with Spaceflight Now. If the valve does need to be replaced and Starliner needs to be removed to access it, question for Mark, would it be able to be housed somewhere in the VIF, or would it need to be rolled back to the C3PF? Where would Starliner go at that point? Thanks.
I don't know what type of operation that Tori would need to do that, if we just need to lift off or actually put it someplace.
I can answer.
There you go.
Yeah, so we don't necessarily have to remove Starliner to stretch the Centaur and support it. We have procedures and tooling for that. So if there are no other issues, we would roll back to the VIF. We'd apply that tooling to support the Centaur and the Starliner on top, and then we'd take off all the pressure and simply remove and replace the valve, repressurize it, remove the tooling, and then we'd be ready to roll back. That procedure takes several days, so it's unlikely we would be prepared to make another attempt before Sunday. But the exact date we would have, we would know more tomorrow.
Like I said, we'll go to the phones now. Let's take Marcia Dunn, Associated Press.
Oh, yes. Hi. When you refer to buzzing or this fluttering, is that just the valve opening and closing really quickly? I'm assuming there's no noise attached to that. So could you explain what a buzzing valve means? And what's the danger having a crew on board to cycle that valve a couple times to try to get it to work?
Yeah, sure. So yes, you have it exactly right. It's opening and closing quickly. It is regulating the pressure like it's supposed to be. Crew was never in any danger. There was never any hazard to the crew. The concern is that if it does that for too many cycles, you use up the fatigue life of the mechanical parts in the valve, and eventually they would fail. We know they won't fail in 200,000 full cycles. We don't actually know what the limit is, because we didn't test it till failure, because it probably goes a really, really long time. But 200,000 is what we know, so that's our limit. So that would be the danger. The way the valve would operate in flight is you saw it in the during the countdown doing its job. Right before launch, we would close it. There's a solenoid that will force it closed. We launch, so it would have had a cycling anyway. And then you take the solenoid off and it returns to that normal operation. I'm sorry, there was a second part to your question. I forgot what it was.
Why, if this had been a satellite, you could have tried turning it off and on yourself, but you didn't want to do that because a crew was on board.
Yeah.
Why is it such a hazard to try that with a crew on board?
Yeah, so we'll come back to the flight rules, which derive from our philosophy of minimizing the exposure of the crew to any hazardous operation. And all of these operations are, I'll say it this way, are inherently safe, but they all carry some probability of an anomaly occurring or an incident occurring. And one of the things that is on that list are moving propellants in and out of the rocket. That's a lot of energy. There's a large quantity of propellant, and we don't do other exotic things with our propellants once they're on the vehicle, so we can afford the opportunity to load the vehicle, stabilize its condition, bring it to a state where we're only topping off what is being boiled off and controlled by pressure relief valves, and then in that condition, we bring in the crew and we place the crew there. If we feel that we have to change that state, recycling valves or offloading propellant or doing things of that nature, now we're reintroducing events that we would like not to occur when the crew is present. In our, the overall reliability assessment and risk assessment is probabilistic. It's a calculation, and all of these things factor in. And the entire, I'll say, safety budget, if you will, is affected by whether you have these events or not. In our case, like I said, our philosophy is we don't have to change the state of the vehicle when the people are there, so we won't. And we've developed all of our processes, our procedures, and our rules around that. And that's what we've practiced on, that's what we've trained on, that's what is written down for the guys in the manual when they're sitting there on console in the heat of battle doing their job. Cycling the valve is changing the state of the vehicle relative to its propellant load. And as tempting as it was, because we've seen it before, and like I said, if it were a satellite, we would have simply cycled the valve, the buzzing would have stopped, finished the count, and launched. That's not what we planned for a crew mission, and so we stayed with the rules and the procedures and scrubbed as a result.
As a reminder to those on the phone to get into the question queue, press star 1, but we'll return to the room here. The one in the red shirt right there, and then we'll come to you.
Hi, thanks. Joey Roulette with Reuters. Question for Tori. Just so I'm understanding correctly, is the testing and analyzing that you're going to be doing throughout the night looking to see how tolerable the buzzing might be, or are you looking to prevent it altogether?
We are literally going to calculate an equivalent number of cycles to compare to the 200,000.
So technically speaking, there could be buzzing in the launch countdown later this week that you'd see, and you'd be fine with that?
Yes.
Okay.
I think what Tori's trying to say is there, how much did the valve move? Did it go full stroke, open and closed? And so how much energy was involved in these cycles? And then compare that to the qualification of the valve. So.
Okay, and we'll take him right here in the first row.
Hi, Ken Kramer, Space Up Close. Thanks again, all of you, for doing this late. I think for Steve and Dana, can you tell us if this gets delayed until Sunday, when are the next launch opportunities? And for Tori, there's no chance to change this valve out at the pad. Is that correct?
That's correct. We need to put it in the tooling I described to stretch it and support it, and we have to do that in the VIF.
Yeah, we'll have to go look at the launch opportunities past, we have Friday and Saturday. Probably the next set of opportunities would be the following week, in the middle of that week sometime. So be like the 14th, 15th time frame. So we'll just have to go look at those, right? That's what the other teams are doing. The Boeing team is looking at the trajectory and looking out in that time frame and looking at launch opportunities. So what we'll do is we'll sit down when Tori and the team take a look at the valve data, whether there's any chance of flying with the cycles that we saw. We'll take a look at that, and if we can't fly with it, and we have to roll back, what's that timeline look like, and then we'll lay all that out and figure out when the next right time to fly is.
I saw a few hands here. We'll go to, yes, the one in the middle first, and then, yep.
Hey, Stephen Clark, Ars Technica for Tori. I heard after the scrub, the team talking about a questionable status of a Centaur fill and drain valve. Is that something that's still being analyzed right now, or is that just already resolved?
No, we're confident in the condition of that, so that's no longer an issue. It's really just this one valve.
Okay, and then we'll take one more in the room here in the center.
Hi, Ken Chang, New York Times for Tori. So you're saying this valve is rated for 200,000 opens and closes, and you got close to that from just a few hours of the launch?
If they were full open and closed, then yes.
So what's the frequency that this could be vibrating at? Is that, and you don't usually do that, right?
This could have been as high or higher than 40 hertz for the total duration of time that we saw it buzzing. And again, like we said, if they were full strokes, that would have been approaching that 200,000 limit. We don't know. That's what we're analyzing overnight. How far did it open and close? And it's really energy, not necessarily the stroke, so we would turn that into an equivalent number of cycles, and that's the analysis for overnight.
I thought the ULI team did a great job by getting the crew off, since we have flight rules that say you don't want to close the valve and change the state, as Tori said, right? You really want to keep that pressure in the tanks where it needs to be for structural capability and to keep the state of the vehicle known. So getting the crew out, then taking the action to preserve the life of the valve potentially, to then give us an opportunity to maybe fly with the valve if we can get through all the data. So.
Okay, we'll go to the phones now. Michael Maidenberg, Wall Street Journal.
Hey, Tori, just want to confirm, this was entirely ULA's call to scrub, or did you guys confer with NASA and Boeing before making that decision? Thanks.
Well, it's always the overall mission director's ultimate call, but the vehicle is our call. We made the call that the vehicle was not in condition to fly and recommended a scrub, and the scrub was accepted.
And the NASA team was following along. We have launch vehicle experts that understand the Atlas vehicle and the Centaur very well. They were following along with all the discussions on the loops, and we concurred with ULA's course of action. So ULA made exactly the right call.
All right, Ryan with NASA Spaceflight on the phone. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks very much for doing this. My question's for Tori. Would a wet dress rehearsal would have caught this issue without having to go into the full launch operations and procedures with the crew on board? Thanks.
Not necessarily. This is a rare condition that can be present in a valve when very specific temperatures, pressures, geometry of the valve as it is sitting in that given stroke can stimulate this. It might happen in a wet dress rehearsal, it might not. We've operated this valve many times before on the vehicle and not had this. So no, you can't, it's not a deterministic thing that always happens when the vehicle is pressurized and it's regulating.
Okay, back here in the room. We'll take her right here, followed by Joey again.
This might be getting super technical now, but for Tori, Lauren Grush with Bloomberg. You mentioned 200,000 cycles for this valve. Do you know what the cycles were before the launch occurred? And I'm just curious where we're at, what starting point we were at. And then to piggyback off of Jeff's question, is it possible to launch tomorrow? Thank you.
Yes, we know how many cycles were on the valve. I don't remember. But I can tell you that with what we added to them, we were approaching 200,000 if they were full cycles, which is, again, what we're figuring out tonight. Would it be possible to launch tomorrow? For us, for the vehicle, we could be ready tomorrow if we find out we have plenty of life. Won't know until tomorrow. And thank you, you stimulated me to remember a third part of an earlier question about sound. Yes, we could hear it. The blue team could hear the valve buzzing when they were upstairs in the white room.
Okay, we'll take Joey's question now.
Thanks. Question for Mark. Does this delay present any risks for Starliner? Are there any things that you need to do to put it in a certain mode while ULA investigates the issue?
No, we've pretty much closed the hatch tonight, and got the vehicle in good position so that we can pick back up tomorrow, or if it's this weekend, that's where the vehicle is in a good position to do that.
Okay, any others in the room before I go to the phones again? Ken, go ahead.
For Tori, did you just notice this issue at T-minus 2 hours and scrubbed it very quickly, or were there some indications earlier in the countdown?
A little bit earlier, so the valve began buzzing. Sometimes they stop on their own. And so the team began monitoring that. They began estimating the cycles that we could be adding to the valve, emphasis on could be, since we don't know the stroke. And in that window of time, you can't do the analysis to estimate it. And it didn't stop, and so as we estimated how many cycles we would have by the time we were launching, that is what triggered the team to make the recommendation to scrub.
All right, on the phone, Marcia Smith, Space Policy Online.
Thanks so much. This question is for Tori. I'm wondering how late tomorrow can you wait to find out the answer to this? You need to know it like 5 hours before launch or 3 hours before launch. And are there other valves that you need to check?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't remember off the top of my head when we would have to make the decision. We will likely have the analysis early tomorrow morning, which should give us plenty of time if we think we're going to fly that day, but the specific time I just don't remember off the top of my head.
I would think we would want to know, like we have a weather brief heading into the tanking operation about 8 hours prior to launch. So somewhere around that time frame when we start to get into the tanking preps with the ULA team and get the crew ready to go, somewhere before that, I think we would like to know whether we're pressing into the countdown for tomorrow or not.
I think it's likely that we would have that recommendation before then. And the way this works is if we don't know that we're confident with the valve by then we're not. And then that ends up being the call.
We have another one on the phone. Ryan again with NASA spaceflight.
Thanks. I've got another question for Tori. At 40 hertz, running numbers in the back of my head, at 40 hertz, assuming that you could reach that 200,000 cycle in about 83 minutes, assuming that it was full cycles. If you can't cycle the valve with the crew on board, doesn't that mean that you could end up in a scenario where the crew is on board and that limit is exceeded, entering uncharted territory for this valve? Thanks.
No, we would, we would monitor that valve just like we did this time. We would have an estimate for how many cycles were on it. That's what we're doing overnight. And then in advance of exceeding that, then we would call, assuming it's doing this again, then we would call the scrub and we would remove the crew. If we don't have enough cycles to have the timeline that is required to do that, then we won't start. The valve will get replaced.
Marcia Smith, you have another question, Space Policy Online on the phone.
Thanks so much. There was another part to my question as to whether or not there were other valves that need to be checked.
We monitored all the pressure relief valves. This is the only one that chose to buzz.
Okay, any other questions here in the room? Well, over there.
Yeah, Will Robinson Smith, Spacefly Now again. Question for Tori. It sounded like, and correct me if I misheard it during the countdown, that there may have been some issue with one of the solid rocket boosters. Was that worked out, or what is the status of the SRBs? Thanks.
Yeah. So that was another instrument that was being followed, and same story. So that was understood, resolved, not a concern. So we won't be coming back to that one.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us for this press conference after today's stand down of the launch attempt. To reiterate what everyone said today, teams are going to be looking at their data, and as always, we're going to let data drive the next decisions, and we hope that you stick with us and check out any updates that we might have in the next few hours by going to blogs.nasa.gov/Boeing-crew-flight-test. So we have that on the screen there. Well, again, thank you so much. We really appreciate you having an interest in the NASA Boeing crew flight test mission, and we hope that you join us for when we do launch. Have a great night.